So you want to dip a toe in the Forgotten Realms, do you? But you don't know where to start? Too many books? Not enough time? Well, my friend, let me help you out. Hi guys, welcome back, bienvenue and all that jazz. It's time to talk about some books. Or more specifically, today I will be talking about the Forgotten Realms. Who is she? What is she? You may ask yourself, where should I start? Well, I've got your back. I will give you multiple different starting places depending on what kind of tropes that you enjoy reading, if there's a specific fantasy race that you particularly enjoy. If you're one of those people that's just like hardcore publication order only, then we can talk a little bit about that, but I would not necessarily recommend doing that. There's also chronological timeline with it. Like, there are so many different aspects and everything to the Forgotten Realms as an overall universe. So let's talk about it. So first, let's just talk about what is the Forgotten Realms. Well, my friends, the Forgotten Realms is a Dungeons & Dragons or D&D campaign setting set in the world of Faerun. So in Faerun, like many complicated fantasy worlds, there are many different races, cultures, cities, etc. In the north, we have Icewind Dale, which is separated by a mountain range called the Spine of the World. And there's all the icy frozen tundra with barbarians and ice worms and that kind of thing. Then we go down and we start having stuff where we have like water-based cities like Waterdeep. We have coastal cities like Baldur's Gate. We have other cities like Neverwinter. And then we go down south and all of that kinds of things. And I'll just put a map up here for your reference so you can see the extent of the Forgotten Realms. And then even more interestingly, not only is there the surface realms, there's also the realm of the catacombs and caverns beneath the surface of the world known as the Underdark. So the Forgotten Realms not only has very varied geography, it also has a very complex pantheon of gods and goddesses. We have Mystra, the goddess of magic, Selyun, goddess of the moon. We have Lolth, demon goddess of the demon web pits, who also is the patron goddess of the evil elves, the Drow. We have shark gods like Sekala. We have Helm, who is like a god of protection. We have Lathander, god of the morning. So there are many, many different gods and goddesses, but typically speaking, when you're jumping into any particular series, only a handful of them will be relevant. But since this is a D&D campaign, there is so much information out there about who the gods and goddesses are and what kind of like purview they have, like what is their realm of influence. So don't be overwhelmed. It's super fun, super exciting, and yes, there is complexity there if you choose to dive into it, but you will never be in any particular series, except maybe the Avatar series where you're exposed to many gods and goddesses. It will usually be a select few. And sometimes the books even have like forwards where you see that the gods and goddesses are basically playing a game of chess against each other, and you then jump into the perspective of the characters and see how that plays out on the surface. All of these different authors throughout the years have contributed to this world, and the kind of flow of the Forgotten Realms seems to be dictated by Wizards of the Coast who control Dungeons and Dragons. So there will be like big world events in the Dungeons and Dragons universe that will affect things in the Forgotten Realms. So there will be things like, most recently was the Sundering, that I don't want to get too much into, but there was a big event that happened called the Sundering, and then there are, I think, 5 or 6 books that explore that event from different authors. So you'll have R.A. Salvatore with his very famous Dark Elf Ranger Driest and his perspective as the Sundering happens. We have Elminster, the like most powerful Archmage by Ed Greenwood. We have his perspective. So it does get very complex, and you can get as deep into it or not as you would like. So if you only really like reading stories about wizards and magic, those exist. If you like reading adventuring stories with small groups of characters, those exist. If you like even more contained stories that focus on 1 or 2 particular magical races, they exist. So let's just jump into some different potential places that you could test out if you really want to read the Forgotten Realms. So the first and probably the most widely talked about, I have like a whole stack of different books over here, so BRB. Okay, took me a second. So the first and probably most widely talked about starting place would be with the Saga of Driest. So we have Driest, who is this dark elf ranger from the Underdark. So in the Underdark, there are different cities of these dark elves, and they are a matriarchal society that worships this demon spider goddess known as Lolth. And so almost everything about their culture is steeped in pleasing the tenets of this fickle demon goddess. So as you can imagine, really awful things happen. Sacrifices, scheming, plotting, backstabbing to become the most powerful house in the drow city of Menzo Baronzin, etc. So these stories have many evil characters. They start in the realm of the Underdark, and our homeboy, Driest, wants to escape this horrible matriarchal society because it just doesn't speak to him as a person. So in this original, I guess it's not technically the original trilogy starts with the Crystal Shard, I want to say, and that was like the first published, but I would not recommend starting there. There's a reason that when these were reprinted, they were reprinted with numbers on the spine. So those are technically books 4, 5, and 6 are the first ones that were published, a la Star Wars. But unlike Star Wars, I would say that you really want to read Homeland, the Dark Elf trilogy, I think is what it's called, first, because it will give you that grounding in what is Dark Elf society, why is Driest trying to escape it, and you see his journey of trying to escape those catacombs beneath the earth after never having seen the sun, to escaping to the surface world and his journey there. And then the Driest saga will expand from there when you meet his cast of characters and friends that you'll see in the second trilogy, starting with the Crystal Shard, where we'll meet the dwarf Runor Battlehammer and his ward Catabree. We'll meet the barbarian Wolfgar, and you'll have that like camaraderie. We'll have our halfling friend Regis, and that is the core cast of characters that you will see throughout the remainder of the Driest saga. I will say that there are 30-something books so far in the Driest saga, which kind of intimidates a lot of people. And so if you first just want to kind of dabble, dip a pinky toe into seeing if you're interested in the Dark Elf world, you could absolutely read the Dark Elf trilogy if you want a much more contained story looking at one man and his battle with his morals and his society and that kind of thing. However, if you want to dip a toe into the Dark Elf world and have a much more epic fantasy plot, then I would recommend that you actually start with The War of the Spider Queen. So The War of the Spider Queen is kind of like a Rick Riordan Presents type situation. So each book is written by a different author, but they have a cohesive plot line that was kind of thought up by R.A. Salvatore. And so what happens in this time in the world is that demon spider queen Lolth that I talked about, for whatever reason, she has gone silent. And so obviously that throws their realm into political turmoil because the people who are in charge of the Dark Elf Society are these priestesses of Lolth. So now they usually use fear and their snake-headed whips that they use to whip and poison people with to keep people in line, but now they have lost their divine magic because they cannot contact their goddess. And so we leave to find out why. So this series is only 5 books, and they're all pretty short, very fast reads. And if you like a group of characters that are kind of enemies, that kind of maybe become frenemies back to enemies, and they're forced together to work towards a common goal, but they are not friends, and they are very epic magic. We are going to see what happens to our goddess, and we're going to travel to the demon web pits, the layer of the abyss that the goddess Lolth controls, to see what happened to her. So if that sounds good to you, definitely maybe consider jumping into the War of the Spider Queen instead. So those first 2 options are if you're really into like the dark elf, underdark type stuff. There are many, many other choices that you could have. One of which is if you just really like wizards and wizard training, and then eventually you like a super OP character who is like the most powerful archmage in existence in this world, then you could check out the Elminster Saga. So this series, I believe, is 6 books, and I'm pretty sure it's completed. I don't think he's writing any more in this world. And I mean, if this doesn't speak to you as a fantasy reader, I don't know what does. Like, this cover is everything. So this is a bind-up of the original Elminster trilogy. So this has Elminster, the Making of a Mage, In Myth Draenor, and The Temptation of. And Elminster Almar starts very classic fantasy as our humble little farm boy when his village is attacked and destroyed by a wizard riding a dragon. So he goes off on a revenge quest to learn how to become a mage so that he can kind of avenge his family, and it kind of spirals from there. Elminster works very closely with the goddess of magic in the Forgotten Realms, whose name is Mystra, and he just is so amazing. He turns into this crotchety old man and has so many adventures. He travels to hell in this world. He survives things that happen because there is one point in the Forgotten Realms history where magic is basically dead and you have to siphon magic off from previously enchanted items. And so he is not always the super OP archmage. There are interesting points, etc., that happen to his character. And this series sits very firmly in my feels. I have heard some people criticize Ed Greenwood for not maybe being the most complex of writers, but I would argue that the Forgotten Realms, you're here more for vibes, adventure, awesome magic, gods that are involved in events. You're not necessarily here for like themes about what it means to be, you know what I mean? Like, it's not really that kind of series or world or like, but it holds a very dear, special place in my heart. So I would highly recommend, if you're more interested in mages and less interested in evil elves, maybe give Elminster a shot. In a similar vein to that, if you're more interested in magic, but not necessarily wizards, but wild magic, then I would recommend that you check out the Shandril Saga, which is a trilogy that is very complete and has been for a very long time. Starts with book 1, Spellfire. And in this series, we have our homegirl, Shandril, and she can tap into the raw energy that contributes to people being able to craft their spells, and it's known as Spellfire. So she can channel basically this like silver fire lightning that is the raw essence of magic. And so that obviously makes her a very big target for different evil factions in this world that want to use her and control her. And she has, I think Elminster is involved in helping kind of train her and guide her. And there are Dracoliches, which are dragon skeletons that have been reanimated. There is raw magic. There is real normal magic. There is a cast that gets thrown in against the odds. I'll just read you the blurb on the back because it's super short and I haven't read this in a super long time. The fire that burns. It can lay low a dragon or heal a wounded warrior. It is the most sought-after magical power in all Faerun, and it is in the reluctant hands of Shandril of High Moon, a young, orphaned kitchen lass. Now she's on the run from half of the evil sorcerers in the land, not to mention their relentless minions, but with the help of a handsome young wizard, some rough-and-tumble knights of Myth Draenor, and a certain old mage of Shadowgel, Elminster, she just might manage to stay alive. At least until tomorrow. So if you want much less of a commitment to kind of dabble in and see some of the cool magic and different creatures and stuff in this world, here's just a nice little trilogy that's on its own that is definitely worth checking out. Then the last kind of place that you could really just like dabble, just the tip of your, you know what I mean, is a standalone novel. And then I'll give you some options for if there are particular tropes or magical races that you really like. I'll breeze through 5 different options for those. So the standalone that you could check out is Silverfall. This is Stories of the Seven Sisters. So the Seven Sisters are the chosen of the goddess of magic, Mystra. Similar to Shandril, they can channel that kind of raw essence of magic. And this is just a super fun time. It would give you a very rapid fire look at different cities in this world, different players in this world. So the Seven Sisters, one of them is the Lady of Waterdeep. One of them is Lady in a Different City. You have a priestess involved. So in this book, rise and be not afraid. Widespread and diabolical is the evil that threatens Faerun. Before its heart can be found, all of the seven sisters will play a part, and all too much blood will be spilled. Drow blood. Drow are evil elves. Those dark elves from the Driest Saga, those are called Drow. 7 linked novellas tell 7 stories of 7 sisters by the creator of the Forgotten Realms. So Ed Greenwood was the kind who kind of kicked off this whole world. So if you just want like a nice, quick, there are 7 short little novellas in this one standalone novel. If you really are not sure that the Forgotten Realms is something that appeals to you, you could definitely check out this quick little novella, get a very good taste of what the magic system is like, get a very good taste of different locations and the kind of like adventure type plots that we have in the Forgotten Realms. This is an excellent go-to for that. Then, the final points that I have for you to jump in are if you like a particular character type, trope, magical creature, whatever. So the first and foremost of these is the Avatar series. So at one point in the history of this world, the over-god, I never know how to say his name, it's Ao, whatever. He basically kicked the gods and goddesses out of the divine realm and into Faerun, where they had to inhabit these avatar bodies. And because they were inhabiting these normal mortal flesh bodies, they could be killed, and their powers were obviously dampened because they're no longer in their divine state. It's a 5-book series where you basically get to see the machinations and shenanigans that go on when the gods are banished to the mortal world. When the gods are banished from the heavens, they must travel through Faerun in the guise of mortals. When 4 companions, last survivors of the Company of the Lynx, find themselves in possession of a mysterious amulet, they must escape death at the hand of Bane, god of murder. When magic itself runs wild, no one can say that the most innocent of spells will not destroy the world. So if you like gods being directly involved, it doesn't get more involved than this. They are literally banished into mortal bodies, and people are trying to kill them to do whatever to get favor for the gods until they reascend to the heavens. So if you love gods and god magic and all of that, Avatar series. If you like clerics, if clerics are your jam, then Forgotten Realms also has you covered. You could check out the Cleric Quintet. So this is a bind-up of all 5 books in the Cleric Quintet, where we follow our boy Catterley, who is a monk for Agma, the god of knowledge, in a temple, aka a library. So book nerds, hello! This also has vampires, dragons, all of it. So if you are really into clerics and holy magic, then you could definitely check out the Cleric Quintet. Tells the tale of the scholar priest Catterley, plucked from the halls of the Edificant Library to fulfill a heroic quest across the land of Faerun. So if you like clerics, you like vampires, you like that kind of vibe, then you could jump into the Cleric Quintet. Then, if you like zombies and necromantic magic, then there is a trilogy for you. So this is the Haunted Lands. So one of the factions in the Forgotten Realms universe is the Thaans. And the Thaans are ruled by basically necromancers, especially in particular, I think at this time it was Tam, who was the main evil guy leading it all. And so if you like necromantic magic, hello. The realm of Thay has long been ruled by the uneasy peace of an alliance of wizards, but all along there has been one who believes he is the true master. And when that one wizard finally moves against his former allies, his homeland could be only the first of his conquests. So again, this is a discrete trilogy, super fun, super fast. If you're into necromantic magic, here you go. Then we have the 2 wildcard picks. So if you are into snakes or snake people, in the Forgotten Realms those are called the Yuan-Ti, then there's a trilogy for you. So this is the House of Serpents trilogy, which this is another bind-up of like all 3 books in that trilogy, which is Venom's Taste, Viper's Kiss, and Vanity's Brood, all by Lisa Smedman. Here you go. So let's just look at the back. Arvin, a young rogue working the humanoid serpent city of Hlondeth, must fight to stop Sybil and her puppet organization, the Pox, from turning all humans into freakish, tainted ones, slaves to heartless, serpentine masters. Snake boy, where you at? I'm a snake. Here you go. And then finally, if you are weird like me, and you have a very weird love fascination with shark movies, we have you covered. Threat from the Sea. This is another bind-up of all 3 books in the trilogy by Mel Odom. This includes Rising Tide, Under Fallen Stars, and The Sea Devil's Eye. Hello. Underwater. So in the Forgotten Realms universe, there are evil beings known as the Hwagin, which are basically like these freaky fish people that worship the shark god Sekala. And Sekala has basically like a high priest who is known as Iakovus. So Iakovus has plotted for long, bitter years to regain the powers that were torn from him by an angry goddess. Now nothing will stand in his way. Oblivious to the growing danger of the undersea civilizations, the surface world is about to awaken to a terrifying threat from the sea, and war will rage up and down the Sword Coast and into the Sea of Fallen Stars. No coast is safe from Iakovus' marauding armies of the deep. The world below the waves rises up to claim the surface. So Iakovus is this guy here, this big megalodon shark. He is a shapeshifter who can transform into a giant shark and has divine powers from the shark god Sekala. And he wants to take over the world. So if you like sharks, underwater things, and shenanigans, here you go. So those are many different places that you could jump into the Forgotten Realms, particularly if one trilogy or something calls to you the most. The Driest saga is by far the most well known, but if you don't want to commit to a 30-plus book series, I hope that one of these other series or the standalone novellas will call out to you so that you will give this world a chance. The Forgotten Realms has a very deep, nice place in my heart because, one, my childhood was not the most fun, and so the Forgotten Realms really were that escape for me. So they are not going to be the most deep, complex, theme-laden stuff that you will ever read, but they will be transportive, magical, full of adventure, all of those kinds of things. So if you're looking for that just adventure story to sweep you off your feet into a fast-paced journey, I can't recommend The Forgotten Realms highly enough. I've never read a series or trilogy. I've read all of the ones that I've recommended you today, and I'm desperate to go back and reread, but obviously it's commitment because there are so many books. And those are just some of the trilogies. There are many, many, many others that I could talk about. Like if you're in love with elves, there are trilogies about like good elves on the surface, all of those kinds of things. The other reason that the Forgotten Realms sits very firmly in my nostalgia and my feels is because when I first started dating my husband 14 years ago, he had some Forgotten Realms books, and I had some Forgotten Realms books, and we actually had different series in this world. And so when we actually started dating and eventually got married, we got to merge our collections together to have more Forgotten Realms than we had apart. And so that will always be super special to me, and I will always cherish these books and series, and I really hope that you consider giving them a chance. If you do, pop down into the comments and let me know which series you think you want to start with, or if you've read The Forgotten Realms, where would you recommend people start? I know everybody always pushes people to Driest, but sometimes people don't want to commit to 30-plus books. They want to dip a little toe and see if they like it. No judgment here. Hopefully one of these series calls to you, and I really hope that you'll chat with me about it. But that's all I have for you today, my friends. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more bookish stuff like this from me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!